Welcome to Native Bidaské, Native News Online's weekly spotlight on the people making news and leading change in Indian country.
Welcome to another edition of Native Bidaské. I'm Levi Rickert, your host, editor of Native News Online. Joining us today, Brian Edwards, who's associate editor of Native News Online. Brian, how you doing today?
Very good, Levi.
Good, great. And we have a very special guest, Commissioner of the Administration for Native Americans, commonly known in Indian country as ANA, and under the Department of Health and Human Services. And it is distinguished guest is Patrice Kunesh, and she is the commissioner, a descendant of the Standing Rock Sioux tribe. And welcome, Commissioner. And hey, we're here to talk about the 50th anniversary of ANA, and congratulations on that milestone. And tell us, if you don't mind, kind of the genesis of ANA.
Well, just let me say, M.P.A. Good day, my relatives. And I really do think it's a good day because we're talking about the Administration for Native Americans, which is a phenomenal program within the Department of Health and Human Services, and really the incredible work we get to do every day to fulfill the dreams of Indian country. So ANA was started in 1974, actually signed by the president in January of 1975, but it's called the Native American Programs Act of 1974. So we're taking this whole year to celebrate the 50 years that has passed by since that, I think, historical law. And I say it's historical because, put ourselves back in the time of 1974, the 1970s, and the Bureau of Indian Affairs was really the only funding source for tribes at the time. And that funding was very restrictive, very constrained, circumscribed by all sorts of rules, regulations, and of course the Indian agents. And this was during, the civil rights era, and you saw a lot of pan-Indian organizations, tribes coming together, really seeking to advocate for themselves, for self-governance, for tribal sovereignty, enforcement of treaty rights. You had the National Congress of American Indians coming out strong, the Native American Rights Fund, established around that time. And so tribal advocates came together and said, we need a funding source that's just for tribes, not the BIA and not under those rules and regulations, but funding that tribes can determine what they need and how to put those monies to good use. So Ron Allen likes to say that ANA is the most flexible funding in the federal government because once those funds are awarded, the recipient, who we call community partners, really get to determine and decide what those should be used for. I think it's an amazing project. I think we're a tiny but mighty, office agency within the federal government, but we pack a punch, and really, again, the work is done in the community. We're a conduit, a pass-through of these fundings.
We like to say often about our newsroom is that it's small but scrappy. So I like tiny but mighty.
Tiny but mighty.
There you go. Why was it established within Health and Human Services?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, and I've asked that myself. You had the Department of the Interior that had the Bureau of Indian Affairs, so they needed another place outside of that realm of DOI. They did not want it to be connected to BIA. And you think about the mission of HHS, and it's about the health and well-being of Native people, Indigenous people. And I think it's a good place to put it under the Administration for Children and Families. Again, separate from IHS, which has a very specific mission to provide healthcare services. ANA is such general funding, and it serves communities So it really seemed to fit ACF.
Now, A&A has 3 emphasis areas, according to your website: social and economic development strategies, environmental regulatory enhancement, and language preservation and maintenance. I guess my question is, how much money does A&A distribute annually? How much is it appropriate?
Yeah, so we get appropriated $60.5 million. That's our budget for FY23 and FY24. And that actually is a $5 million increase from the previous fiscal years. And the reason we got that $5 million was to do languages. When I say we're tiny but mighty, we push out as much of our funding as we possibly can to focus on to grants. And again, it's our whole reason for being is to do grants to tribes and native serving organizations. And I think the original intent of A&A was social and economic development, because it is that broad category. It's not defined, it's not circumscribed, and we really wanted to lift up in the way that are needed tribal governance capacity, tribal business plans, anything that tribes really felt would support and ameliorate their social well-being. So social and economic development has always been sort of the mainstay. And like I mentioned earlier, they determine, what their needs are, what is the condition in that community. Recently, we've heard a lot of concerns about healing, sort of poor health outcomes and needs for healing. And we've just seen amazing cultural programs come alive through A&A funding. The ERE, or the Environmental Regulatory Enhancement, is really sort of a funny way of saying, what do tribes need to do to protect their environment? And it's one of our smaller and maybe less known grant categories, but we have seen some really super amazing climate change, climate readiness, disaster relief projects coming through A&A. I just met with some folks, Alaskan Native project, that are looking at that coastal area that still, is realizing a demise from the Exxon Valdez spill. So they're trying to rehabilitate that whole marine agriculture area. And then language preservation, language revitalization, language immersion is one of our most, I think, up and coming program areas. 2 years ago, Congress passed the Durban-Feeling Native Languages Act, and it charged A&A with the responsibility to do a national survey of all Native languages, and to report back to the president and to Congress on what languages are spoken and what is the proficiency of these languages. Well, with our partners at Department of Education and Department of the Interior, we know that Native language is tied to tribal sovereignty and tribal identity, just that real cultural resonance that is so important in all of our communities. So we've really been highlighting and advancing language revitalization, and Congress has given us, in response to our requests, additional funding. In the president's budget for FY25, again, we asked for additional funds for language. Language revitalization is what we hear tribes really telling us is so needed. And they're taking it on in a big way. And some of the most joyful moments I've had in my time here is visiting the projects in the communities where the little children, the youngest learners, are immersed in school with their parents, with their other siblings, and all they hear is their Indian language. It's just so beautiful.
Yeah, that is beautiful. I'm part of that generation that was kind of stripped from us, so I'm so happy to hear that. And I understand during the COVID-19 pandemic, we lost so many of our elders who were the language speakers. So have you guys taken special note of that?
We have. You know, I did go out to Cherokee Nation, and I did visit with their tribal council and their principal chief, and we had a very special tour of the Durban Feeling Language Center, which is what this law was named after.
Mhm.
And it's a language immersion school from the very youngest to through high school. And the director of this school took me outside the building, and it's there's a big bell in front of the building, and every time it just always hits me. Every time an elder passes, they go out there and ring the bell.
Oh, wow.
Because they know that elder carries with them that language knowledge, that cultural knowledge, that indigenous way of knowing. And so people come and gather, and they hear the story of the life of this Native elder. And I've heard so many stories like this around the country where we're revering our elders in such a special way. And trying to capture that indigenous knowledge, right, and really preserve it for the rest of the community. Another one of our projects is Lakota People's Fund out in Pine Ridge, and they have an incredible art space right in the village there, and they have a special recording booth where they'll bring in anyone who wants to record. It's sort of like a StoryCorps, place. But they go out and seek these stories and bring in the elders and have them talk together, talk Indian, so that they can be recorded forever and ever. I just think that's such a beautiful way of looking at community and preserving that knowledge, that history.
Well, Commissioner, you have given us a lot of food for thought. One of the used to be on our masthead celebrating Native voices here at Native News Online. So after this, we'll get with you and your staff to get some good story ideas. I'll turn it back over to Brian.
Commissioner, I mean, I you talked about so many great things. I mean, one of the things that I kind of glommed onto was kind of like climate change and the work with disaster relief. I mean, climate change is like all over Indian country right now, suffering the effects, but also potential solutions. I mean, there's the EPA, the DOI, USDA, like everybody's addressing climate change in some way. I'm curious, how does ANA collaborate with them and the tribes, of course?
Right. So we love to do intergovernmental collaboration. That's something that I know HHS is very big on. Another one of my hats, I'm the commissioner of ANA. I'm a deputy assistant secretary for Native American Affairs, so I fulfill that that policy role, and I'm the chair of the Intergovernmental Council on Native American Affairs. So those are the big things going on at HHS and intergovernmentally. So we have FEMA is of course the big agency. We also have our disaster relief offices here. But let me tell you a story that I recently visited. So, the Maui fires have been incredibly destructive, and it may not be climate change, except that it's been terribly dry in Hawaii, and ANA serves American Indians, Alaska Natives, Native Hawaiians, and then Pacific Islanders. So I recently spent a couple weeks in Hawaii and American Samoa, which we serve as well. And I was able to bring together our community partners in Hawaii, and we talked about our response to the Maui fires. We lost We lost a project because they lost their building. And again, this was a language and cultural space, and I think it was held in a local church. That church burned down, and the people participating lost their homes. So they've all been dispersed, and we're trying to figure out how to pull that back together. In American Samoa, I visited their community college, who has an A&A grant for disaster relief around tsunami. And they've been terribly impacted, by changes in weather patterns and so forth. We have a big conference every year. We're calling it, this year, it's going to be our 50th celebration, a convening, and we're putting together a special panel just on this topic. Environmental issues, climate change issues, sort of disaster readiness issues, because it's not just coastal, it's internal as well, with the dryness, the fires, the winds, and so forth. And we're seeing more interest within our community partners to have that cross collaboration.
Well, of course, Secretary Holland's been real strong on this, and I'm sure you have as well. The indigenous knowledge of with everything that's happening with climate change. I have been told that many people are looking to indigenous peoples for some solutions, because some of our ancestors knew what they were doing way back when, and so I'm sure you're hearing the same types of things.
Well, Levi, it's so neat that you would share that, because there's when I'm out in community with our community partners, there's a lot of protocol, and there's respect, there's prayers, there's formal coming together, but they often talk about star knowledge. They talk about moon wisdom, what we know and understand from the, and I just have to sit and appreciate that, that I'm in a different space. There's a different element to this engagement. And it's not just about the dollars and the reporting and how many kids have you served. There's really something much deeper going on in that community. And I will spend as much time as I possibly can. And what really moves me is when I see the programs really focused at the youth. We have our youngest learners, of course, but some of the projects for high school kids are really challenging them to get off their phones, off of their devices, right?
Yes.
So let's talk relationship and be relational, and sort of open your mind and heart to a different way of being. And that is the indigenous way of being. And I do think these programs are saving lives. I truly do. And this is really heartfelt work. It's not because they have to. It's not because they're being overregulated and doing it. It's because this is a way they're touching their people and keeping them close.
Social media sometimes feels like an oxymoron to me. People are too busy. They're too busy looking at their phones to be social.
Yeah.
So Levi and I both saw you in DC at the Native CDFI Summit in December, and kind of my takeaway from your remarks when you spoke was that A&A is kind of a really well-kept secret, and it's reinventing itself as it turns 50. So talk a little bit about the future, the next 50 years, because you're going to be there the whole time, right?
To be 50, you can reinvent yourself. How about that?
I love it.
Yeah. So, and this is a good time because we've been talking a lot here at HHS and ACF about the new Executive Order 14112, which really is all about flexible federal funding to support tribes. Is this this new era of self-determination. Well, I came into ANA really bound and determined, with that actual frame of reference. So one of the first things I did is we need to change the way we run our program and do our grants management. And we need to streamline the application process. We need to reduce the number of scoring criteria. We need to make it less rigorous and less complex. But mostly what I wanted to do is to change the way we fund our grants. So previously our grant was 170 pages, and we heard from tribal leaders that it was way too bad, burdensome, complex, and actually fearful. And we would fund in 3-year increments of a 3-year program. So what I decided to do is we're going to fully fund projects upfront, get the money in the community, working immediately so that the project can get off the ground, people can be hired, supplies or materials acquired. I think that is the essence of what this EO is looking for as well. We went from 170 to like 70 pages. We just want to know what is that big, bold idea that you're trying to address, and how can we help you do that? We want to be partners. We don't want to be obstacles and then, barriers to doing that work. We want to put those funds in the community's hands and let them, do whatever it takes. And we've heard some really terrific, excitement out there. We are accepting applications through the end of May. I don't know if we're going to get 20 or 200 or what have you, but I know there's a lot of excitement, and I think this is just the beginning of what we'd like to do to really support the needs and dreams of Indian country.
Flexible federal grant funding. I bet you're going to get 200.
Maybe more. It's something that excites us as well, and we need to be ready to be partners in advancing this whole of government approach to self-governance.
Well, I love where you're going with it, and that flexible funding is I think something that tribes really need, and tribal organizations. You fund tribes and federal but nonprofit tribal organizations. Is that correct?
We do. We have Native serving nonprofit organizations, and I think we're one of the few federal agencies that can do tribal consortiums, which we find, for example, in Alaska.
Sure. Well, thank you so much. And again, congratulations on the 50th anniversary. I know you're all proud, and please feed us stories. We love at Native News to promote success.
We've got lots of stories, and maybe you'd like to come to DC when we have our convening and meet all of these amazing people. It really will just change the way you think or understand of what's going on in the heart of those communities.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons we started Native News Online over 13 years ago, is really celebrate who we are as Native people. And as you all know, Commissioner, we do have to deal with some harsh realities in Indian country. To see people overcoming, see them come up with progressive, innovative ways to overcome, and it's
right. And the best thing is that these are all community driven, community designed, community driven. I just want to get the funds to them as quickly as possible and see what they can make of it.
Okay. And thank you very much, and Commissioner Chimigwich, to you and to our viewers. Thank you for tuning in to another edition of Native Bidaské. Remember, this is the election year. If you register to vote, we encourage you to go register to vote. We're not going to tell you who to vote for, but please register to vote. So many people are saying this is one of the most critical elections in our lifetime. And I know we've heard that before, but I really believe that to be true this time. So Chi Miigwech will have a special guest again next week. Tune in again.
If you appreciate what we do here at Native News Online, we invite you to donate to support our continued work covering Indian country. You can scan this code with your smartphone or go to the link located below this video to donate today. We greatly appreciate your support. Please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And be sure to scan this code or go to the link below to subscribe to our newsletter. Thank you for joining us today, and please be sure to join us again next week for another episode of Native Bidaské. Chi Miigwech.